Spring football is closing in. Let's talk safeties.
In the world full of podcasts, he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of hot takes, an Auburn sports homer, master of the boog, and message board legend. Get your buttons buttoned and your hats flattened because the Top Button Podcast is about to kick off. And you don't want to miss your courtside seat. Now, here's your host, Charlie Five.
Yes, sir. We're back. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Rush, a.k.a. Charlie Five, and we are ready to get after it. Spring football is closing in. You're less than 2 weeks away. And we're going to go position by position over the next couple of days and walk through talking about the spring storylines, position battles, things like that. And today we're going to start off with safeties. The good thing is when you start off this conversation, you get to start off with one solid dude that you know is your guy. Possible SEC, all SEC player, all American type player. And that's Kaleb Harris. And we're going to dive into that in just a second. Before we do that, we got to give a shout out to Uncle Keith's Red Sauce. Go to UncleKeith'sRedSauce.com. Use coupon code TheBarn25. Some people call it a scoop-on code if you want to get you some scoops of this fantastic sauce. So TheBarn25 to take 25% off your order. If you live in the state of Alabama, you can go to any Publix. If you live in Birmingham, the Birmingham area, you can go to any Piggly Wiggly. A Southern-style salsa, amazing texture, amazing flavor, and it's an Auburn family, Auburn fans that you can support. So show them some love, save big. I've been getting lots of texts, lots of messages talking about how good this stuff is. Jump on the train. Uncle Keith's Red Sauce. It's good, y'all. It's so much fun to talk about a position group where it's not like, I ain't got a clue. I have no idea. It could be this guy. 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 Who's going to step up? We have no idea. We get to start this conversation off with a dadgum, bona fide, super hulking teen stud, Kaleb Harris, who came on last year as a true freshman, the lowest rated player in the whole recruiting class. Think about that. 25 plus kids. He's the very last player. He may have been a little bit over a punter if we brought in he may have been a little bit higher rated than, a punter or a kicker. He was but the lowest rated player in the whole class, and he ends up being arguably one of the best players in the class. He was one of the best players on the defense last year in general by the end of the year. One of the most reliable players, a guy that you could go out there and was not afraid of contact, was not afraid to put his helmet down and not the crown, though. You can't hit with the crown of the helmet. Put his helmet down, but his face mask up. How about that? And make a big play. He started 6 games, so he wasn't like starter at the beginning of the year. It was one of those things where it was so quick and you knew so little about him that you kind of had to throw him in there a little bit to see how he would react. I'm sure he's, a great practice player, but how does it translate to the field? And he just kept making plays to the point where they were like, he's got to go out there at the beginning and he's got to be the guy. You started with Caleb Wooden, who's played a ton of college football, and Sylvester Smith, who's, he would be going into his 3rd year in the system or in 3rd year at Auburn. You had to go with those 2 guys, and then Kaleb just eventually unseated the other Kaleb. Harris unseated Wooden and ended up being, again, one of the best players on the defense. 44 tackles, 29 solo. That is a fantastic solo to assisted tackle ratio. I want to see more solo tackles than I see assisted tackles when I look at total tackle numbers. And that's good. That's a good number right there. 3 pass deflections, 1 forced fumble. He's locked in. I don't think there's anybody that's going to beat him out. He's going to be your strong safety, your box safety, whatever you want to call it. The guy that is going to eat up tight ends. He's going to eat up backs out of the backfield. And then if you come downhill, he's going to diagnose it quickly, and then he's going to come hit you in the mouth. If you want to get him one-on-one on the outside with a little flat route, he'll put you on the ground. I mean, I just go back to the Kentucky game. I think about Berrien Brown, who was one of Kentucky's best playmaker, who I think portaled to maybe LSU or Ole Miss, can't really remember. Stud player, true freshman, doesn't matter. Helmet to helmet, you're going down. Kid's fearless. You feel so good that you can have that conversation, that you start off with at least one guy that's completely locked in. So the competition is who's going to be that lurker safety, that free safety, that center fielder, and then who's going to be his backup, who's going to be Kaleb Harris's backup. That's really the conversation, because Kaleb Harris ain't going nowhere. Barring injury, he's your guy. What a luxury to have a freshman. I know college football changes seemingly with the wind, and so you can't ever rest easy, but how good it has to feel to know that you hit on a true freshman, because in theory, those guys typically don't go – starters typically don't go elsewhere unless you're at a lower tier school. And Auburn's not one of the lower tier schools, haven't been performing as an upper tier school, but typically starters, when there's not coaching turnover, when there's not coaching turmoil, typically those guys stay. So as long as you can put a good product on the field, you feel confident that you got at least 2 more years of Kaleb Harris. That's got to feel good. When you're planning, when you're, filling out your depth chart, when you go to recruiting, when you're looking in the portal, I got that thing. I got that spot locked in for at least 2 years. It's got to feel good. So who are the others? Who's going to play beside him? Who's going to play behind him? You got to go first to Sylvester Smith. Okay, you got to look at him first. He played the second most snaps of any safety. He played more of that lurker role, and he had some really good. He was good at times, and he was bad at times. Okay, he's not quite as physically gifted to me as Kaleb Harris, a little bit smaller, but he is just as willing of a tackler, just as willing of a put your head in there and make a play as anybody. But there were times I thought, there were times that I thought he was suspect, especially in coverage down the field. I thought he struggled at times. But this will be his 3rd year at Auburn, I believe. Yeah, he was one of the first Hugh Freeze commits. I think he flipped him when you got here. That helps, 2 years consecutive under DJ Durkin. That's big time. I think you probably start there at the free safety. And then to me, it's all about, what happens after that. You had Caleb Wooden that also rotated some there. He went into the transfer portal, played a lot of football, so it's opened a lot of doors. You bring in 2 hot shot freshmen. Anquan Fagans is probably more of a free safety, and Eric Winters is more of a strong safety. And then you got your boy Taye Seymore that you brought in from Georgia Tech. Eric Singleton Jr.'s roommate. And this isn't just a role player. This is a guy that played in all 12 games last year. 41 tackles, 26 solo. Again, very similar stats to Kaleb Harris. Very good solo tackle to assisted tackle ratio. I've made that stat up, by the way, but I think it should be like an actual stat in the box score. I want to know your ratio. I want to know how many. Look, there's pile jumpers. There's a lot of pile jumpers out there, okay, where I see a pile, I jump on it, and I get an assisted tackle. And then you look, and there's a linebacker that's got 227 tackles, and about 200 of them are assisted. DBs are a little bit different because a lot of times when you're making tackles, it's, one-on-one, so there's not a ton of pile jumping opportunities. But, hey, I love a good solo to assisted tackle ratio. I want to see it up there. We can get more than 2-to-1. I'm fired up, and this one's a good one. 2 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble. Can he challenge for a starting role? I think he absolutely will. I think he could be a very good backup for Kaleb Harris, but I think he could also challenge Sylvester Smith as that, in that free safety role. He's not quite as big as Kaleb Harris, Taye Seymore, So it's perfect. He can kind of be that speedy lurker back there, play center field, don't let anything behind you, and let all the other guys clean up underneath. I think Anquan Fagans starts off more in the free safety role. Like I said earlier, I think you see Eric Winters as the strong safety role. And we're going to talk about those two guys here in just a second. But before we do that, we got to give a shout out to Roback. Go to roback.com, use coupon code BUTTON20 to take 20% off your order. Anything you can imagine polo wise. You like prints, you like stripes, you like solids, they got them. Top button friendly, great top button. Hey, if it's got a button on the top, you should probably button it. And this is their great top button polos if you want to go that route. Great collars. You know how I am about collars. They got hoodies, quarter zips, everything you can imagine. Awesome stuff. They even have Auburn license apparel. So definitely check them out, roback.com. Eric Winters and Anquan Fagans. Again, two studs, two of the best in the country. And you got them in the same class. Fagans, to me, could be, if you had to rank athletes in the class of last year, he's going to be in the top 3 or 4 of just overall athletes. Can do a little bit of it all. He could probably play wide receiver if he wanted to. He could probably play corner if he wanted to, which is why I think he makes an unbelievable free safety prospect. He's got the range, and then he's willing to again put his head in there and make a tackle. No matter who is at that free safety position, I think they're going to be looking over their shoulder because I think this kid's coming. He's going to be on the field. He's going to be on the field quickly. You're not going to be able to keep him off. He's a really, really good player. And I love to see guys like that can come in and push the guys in front of them. Even if all things are equal, you may give the nod to the guy that's got a little bit more experience, but that other young guy is going to be nipping at his heels. When you go to a more of a dime package where you got to have more DBs on the field, I could see Anquan carving a role there very, very easy. I could even see him getting some snaps, maybe even at nickel. He's just that good. You can't keep this kid off the field. He's going to be really, really interesting to watch in spring. Watch how he develops and what order he goes in. That's the big thing when in spring. When does this person go in line? Look at count the order of the line and where is he in line as far as reps go. And then watch him slowly move up to where he becomes, first in line. I can't wait to see that kid and how that whole thing works out because he's going to be really good. Eric Winters, again, when you're talking about best athletes in the class, he may be the overall best athlete in the class. Bigger kid. Again, he played offense. He played defense. He played quarterback, wide receiver, running back, safety, linebacker. He played everything at, 7A and really was a key factor of that high school enterprise. They became really good. They were a factor in 7A this year. And I think he could be another one that is going to be hard to keep off the field. The only problem is it feels like to me he's more of a Kaleb Harris type player than a Anquan Fagans type player. He's more of a box safety, like come downhill, fill up the, cover the flat, catch folks coming out of the backfield, run support. That to me feels like what kind of player he's going to be. And that Kaleb Harris is going to play as many snaps as he could possibly play. So where does Eric Winters fit in? That's going to be because you can't keep that kid off the field for very long. That's the kind of kid that if he doesn't quite get the reps that he feels like he deserves, that's when you'd have to really work to keep. You'd really work to save, from the portal, because he could be a starter at I think he could be a starter as a freshman at several different, schools. So how that whole deal works out is going to be very, very interesting because you got to play that kid. Got to figure out a way. Got to figure out a role for him. There's some other safeties that are going to be in the room. one of the more intriguing storylines, one of the more intriguing prospects on the whole team has been Terrence Love to me. Terrence Love is a guy who I feel like has sort of been a victim of coaching turnover and not really knowing where they want to play him, like not really knowing where he fits in. Because you look at the way his weight fluctuates. Last year he gained a lot of weight. Maybe he's going to play more of that box safety, more linebacker support, run support. And then you look at this year, he's dropped a lot of weight. So now he's back down to 210, 212, something a little bit more natural. Speed has always been something that you've been of a concern with him. And you wonder, is that because of the extra bulk? Is that because, he weighed more and you were asking him to do things that, you need smaller, quicker guys to be able to do? I think he may have sort of found his role. And then again, having a coordinator in place for 2 consecutive seasons, that helps too. Knowing what this player can do and where he needs to be, that may have been the strategy. Hey, look, you're definitely a safety in this defense. Let's drop some weight. You're at like 225. Let's get you down to about 212, 210, where you can move a little bit better. And let's see what we can do in spring. I think that's sort of been the strategy with him. And I think it could pay off. I think he could be able to carve out a role. Again, man, if you just look at athletes, if it's just a beauty contest, as far as a beauty contest and pads, you're like, I got to pick out the athlete. You're going to pick Terrence Love is going to be in there. Terrence Love is going to be one that you're going to point to and say, golly, that's a good looking kid right there. That's got to be one of the better players, in that position group. So he's got all the physical tools. Now he's just got to put it together. I think they got their weight in the right spot. I'll be very interested to see in which direction they go with him in the spring, because I'm going to be honest, I was very worried he could be a portal casualty in December, in the winter. But he hung in there, and he's going to give it another go. So we'll see what happens in spring with him. You got Jacquizz Robinson, the transfer from, I believe, Colorado last year, who played some snaps. Another great rotational player. I'm not really sure if you're necessarily worried about him going anywhere. I think this is it for him. This is his senior season. So just experience, depth. You got those guys coming back too. And then we got a new coach. We have a new safeties coach, TJ Rushing. You had the great Charles Kelly, who everybody loved, who everybody adored, who took the head coaching gig over at Jacksonville State. And the good thing is that the one thing about Charles Kelly was he was not necessarily a DJ Durkin guy. Now, they worked together great, okay? Can't really blame much about I can't really point to the defense on anything unless we just want to nitpick stuff like third down defense or whatever. Overall, the defense in general gave us a chance to win just about every single game, okay? But there had to be a little bit of a learning curve, learning each other. Charles Kelly's been a defensive coordinator before. Charles Kelly's been, assistant head coaches before. You're having to come in, and now you're back to kind of working and learning a new system. I'm sure there was I think they got along great, but I'm sure there was some, philosophy stuff that had to be learned, adjusted, things like that. So when you move on to a new coach, you're like, man, we got to go through that whole thing again. No, you don't. You got TJ Rushing, who came with DJ Durkin from Texas A&M, that you feel really, really good about. And then you get essentially 2 years of the same coach. He was already here last year helping with safeties, and now he's just going to be the head guy, already sort of on track with what DJ Durkin wants to do. So it's almost like no transition whatsoever. There's going to be this guy's going to be a really good recruiter. He's already making an impact. He made an impact last year. He helped a lot last year on recruiting. He recruited fantastic at Texas A&M. Already sort of getting involved in the community. He just feels like an Auburn guy. Really like TJ Rushing. So the safety group in general is going to be exciting to watch. It's one of the position battles where, even though you got Kaleb Harris, that second spot has always been up in the air to me. Not really sure who fills that role. So between linebacker and safety, these were my two position groups where I'm like, man, how does this whole thing shake out? I'm a little bit not necessarily concerned, but just very interested to see how this whole deal shakes out. But the cool thing is you have an elite player that you can set as your foundation, and that will probably be able to erase a lot of deficiencies that you have elsewhere. So that's always good when you can start off with an all SEC, all American type player. You feel really good about it. So we're going to keep doing this position by position as we lead up to spring. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the safety group? Are you nervous? Do you feel good about it? Where do you think Taye Seymore fits in? Do you think he can take over? Do you think he takes over at that free safety spot? Do you think he unseats Sylvester Smith, or do you think this is the year that Sylvester Smith breaks through? Love to hear your thoughts. We're going to be doing this again every single day this week and leading up to spring. Guys, I really appreciate it. If you like this show, like it. If you like the channel, subscribe to it. Follow me on Twitter, _Charlie_5. We'll be back again tomorrow with a barn takeover. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. Stay buttoned.
Thanks for listening, and drive home safely.